So, welcome everybody to Granite Group HQ. My name is David Webley, for those that don't know me. I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Reid today from Success Curious, talking about the identity dilemma, and this is a copy of Andy's first book, Success Curious. So we thought, I said to Pete this morning, I said, what number of conversation with thought leaders is this? Because as many will remember, in COVID, we put it online, and we've always done events over 15 years, but we've changed the branding to Conversation with Thought Leaders. Pete tells me it's number 42, so I thought as an icebreaker, and you know we like book giveaways, this might be quite interesting. Maybe I'm showing my age. So, the icebreaker, the number 42.
I think, well, there you go. Don't need 40
there
seconds.
We go. Meaning of life. Didn't even need to say it. And you said Douglas Adams, Annie. So there we go. You should have.
I swear, they must have a cheat sheet or something, right?
Yeah, no. But The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, for those that don't know, was 1978 to 1980. Originally the radio, and then it became books, comics, and TV. And yeah, that was the icebreaker. It wasn't much of an icebreaker, but never mind.
Well.
There we go, Dana.
Wasn't so much of an icebreaker, more of like an ice dive.
It was an ice dive. Yeah, I fell through the ice.
I was like, yeah, quite.
So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Andy, and over to you, mate.
Thank you so much for having me. I tell you what, gang, I really appreciate you, one, getting up at this time in the morning to come say hello to little old me, but two, I know that time is our most valuable asset, right? It's the only thing that's finite. So I really appreciate you giving up some of yours for mine. And fingers crossed, I can make it worthwhile. Fingers crossed. If I didn't, then please come and tell me, and I'll try and repay you in some way, shape, or form. Now, this whole success curious thing, right? I don't think there is such a thing as an expert when it comes to success. But anybody that claims to be an expert around the things like success, they're kidding themselves, because success realistically it's very different for every single individual on this planet. And I don't know if anybody else has got a textbook for the wiring of every individual of all 8 billion people. Not possible, right? So I like to think of myself as a bit of an explorer when it comes to success. And the word curious is kind of sums me up a little bit. I like asking questions. When you're the son of 2 police officers, you've got no other choice, really, right? Other than to ask questions, okay? So I want to have a chat about something that I've been pondering over. And really, gang, this is just a conversation. This is more of a conversation more than me talking at you. I want to talk with you, if that's okay. Because I've been led to believe, and this is only going off what he's told me. Apparently, I'm in a room full of learned individuals. Okay, okay. Apparently, you're all more intelligent than me. Well, I'd like to think you are, okay? God help you if you're not, right? But I want to have a chat about this word identity, this word that I've been marinating on for a wee while. It's something that I find we are getting it twisted, but I do feel that society has got a real crisis when it comes to identity. I think at the minute everyone's trying to identify themselves by one of the various letters of the alphabet, but it gets a lot deeper than that. For me, it's a much more visceral, way more deeper thing than this in terms of where we're sitting when it comes to identity. I want to start by introducing you to a lad called Chris. Not that guy, hopefully you know him by now. But this is a lad called Chris, right? He's 19 years old, and he's been absolutely obsessed with real estate since he was little, yeah? Now, if there was a bingo card of neurodivergent issues, he would have the straight line, right? He would be the winner, okay? He was born with some birth defects. He was born with bits of his ear missing and bits of his brain missing and all sorts of stuff, right? Look, there's every possibility he's never going to be able to be independent, right? Now his mum, who is a C-suite sales exec, right? She's not exactly got spare time. Incredible woman. She takes him every weekend to go drive around watching auctions. Every weekend without fail, right? And off the back of that, he's garnered himself a bit of a following to the point that he's actually started to be called an influencer in the space, right? To the extent now, because his mum is a switched on individual, she's now going to start creating a brand for him that he can make money off, because his dream is to buy his own home, right? His dream is to buy his own home. Now, I came across Chris via Instagram, ironically, and he was working with a buyer because he said, "Oi, buddy, do you want to come drive? Do you want to come for a ride along with me? We'll come call some auctions." Because I don't like talking about myself too much, if you haven't noticed. But to give you a bit of an idea as to who I am, I like shouting at people for a living, right? I'm an auctioneer by trade, okay, and I really like to think that I like to really sort of try and learn as much as I can about human behaviour as best as possible. Like I say, I'm a curious kind of guy. And I am going to ask you a question in a minute, right? But when it comes to being curious around the topic of success, you can argue that success is about the tangibles, right? It's about the numbers, it's about the bank balance, it's about the status, it's about the C whatever it is, because apparently C doesn't stand for cheap, it stands for clever, right? I would argue that that young lad there at 19 years old shows more passion that would lean towards a successful human being than what any of us could do in a whole career. So it poses the first question I want to ask you, gang, because I love him, and it's me, Chris Real Estate. Please follow him. He is a legend, right? He is an absolute superstar. Asks about 1 billion questions. Like I needed to go lie down after that day, right? I've never had so many questions asked of me. I didn't know I had some of the answers. Question I want to ask you is what's your definition of a successful human? So part of my Swiss Army knife of things that I do, because I talk about neurodivergent, I am riddled with ADHD, so I have about 17 different things going on at once. As well as being an auctioneer, I stumbled across a book deal and wrote a book last year. I've got a podcast as well called Success Curious, and this is the first question I ask all of my guests. What's your definition of a successful human? Now, interestingly, if I was to ask any of you guys, put you on the spot, anyone want to pose an answer?
Just as a reminder, we've got 18 now of Andy's books, so any comments get a book. So there's the incentive.
Look, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not exactly precious about them, so chances are you might all get one at some stage. So hopefully we can just interact, but not through bribery. That, and it's not much of a bribe, let's be honest. Anybody want to pose an answer? Go for it.
Simon.
Strong emotional connection with multiple people.
Good effort. Well, at least you give it a crack, right? Which is wonderful. Go for it.
Acknowledged achievement.
Acknowledged achievement and really cool trousers.
Thank you.
Nice.
Simon's got a comment.
Fulfilling their potential.
Fulfilling potential. Go for it.
Living through your values.
Oh,
I like that one.
sexy. Go. Big man.
I would say it's about contributing to the world in some way.
Yep.
Somebody who's happy.
Persistent and trustworthy.
Look at this, man. Jeez, Louise, this is amazing. Can I rent a crowd? This is fantastic.
2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Oh, get you.
Kind.
You're kind. I can tell. You've got one of the kindest faces I've ever seen. That's amazing. All right. So, and here's my point, right? You all gave it a crack. But has any of you actually sat down and marinated on that question? Really?
It depends which perspective you're looking at.
Well, that's part of the thing, right? That's part of it, right? I knew you lot were clever, right? So that's the whole point of it. So whenever I pose people this question, they tend to stutter, or a few people generally tend to grab answers. And you guys are actually, you're actually showing a different sort of slant on it. But the majority of people that come on my podcast, they tend to grab words that are very common in society, like integrity and consistency and commitment and all these sorts of words, right? All these, what I refer to as cereal box values. Get them off a packet of a cereal box, right? Now, my personal, for those of you that even give a stuff, my definition of a successful human is a human in flow. Put simply, a human in flow, where there's an alignment between who you are, what you do, and why you exist. I like that, all right? I like simple, by the way. One of my values is simplicity. Ultimate form of sophistication, apparently, according to Mr. Da Vinci. All right, so he's one of the more complex individuals on the planet. Now, common issues when we chase success. A lot of this stuff that I have, again, go to bingo card theory, I have had all of these at various stages, as I'm sure a bunch of you have as well, all right? That top one, the one that actually nearly did drive me into a loony bin, all right? Got no harm in saying I'm a mental health advocate. I've been taking the trip down mental health lane for over a decade now. I've got my little badge to prove it and all that sort of stuff, right? But never feeling satisfied is something that nearly actually killed me. It actually nearly did. Okay, so constant resistance to success. Whenever you achieve something, someone will either say, "Oh, could you have done that?" or "You could have done this a little bit better," or whatever you think you've done that's really, really good. Someone might go, "But is it you?" You know. I know, my friend. I know. Overly self-critical. How many of you are really self-critical? Yep. Got the t-shirt on that one as well. Greater need for external validation. Now that one is becoming very, very problematic in today's society. Very problematic. I don't blame social media. I don't. Because social media is an inanimate object. It's how humans have used it that's the problem. The way that social media was invented back in the day, it was designed to keep people connected. The level of disconnect has never been so high. Interesting, right? It's kind of exposed humans, really, for their vulnerabilities. This last one, though, will segue me into my next question. Because the next question that I generally tend to ask lots of people that are in rooms is this next one. If you were to write your values in a line, right? And I always get a picture of The Usual Suspects. You know the film? Usual Suspects? Right, I always get a picture of The Usual Suspects in my head when I ask this. Is if you could put your values in a lineup and then have 3 or 4 or 4 or 5 other sets of values above and below it, could your loved ones pick out which one's you? Because I would argue that for the vast majority of the working population, if not the population generally, is one, you'd be surprised and perhaps horrified as to the number of people that don't even know what their values are, right? And if they do try and have a crack at values, again, it's cereal box stuff that is being commoditized to try and make them get more sales, right? So while I was a real estate auctioneer, I was obviously in real estate sales for a while as well, and my values on my little bio, the one where you lot are loath to look at because everyone hates real estate agents, right? It was like integrity and all this sort of carry on, right? It was actually when my old man passed away in 2020, not from COVID, right? COVID was a walk in the park after what happened to us at the start of 2020. Okay, a week into Mr. Morrison's lockdown 1, find out that the old man's terminal. A week after that, find out my mum has also got cancer across the other side of the world. That was fun. But look, honestly, I'm grateful that I managed to get across there and be at my dad's bedside. And when he was in palliative care, because while I was over there, he had a stroke, and then writing was on the wall. I could hear him breathing, right? And you know that question that I told you nearly put me in a loony bin? That's never feeling satisfied. I was sort of marinating on that. And hearing his breathing, that was the only thing I could hear. And all of a sudden, without telling me anything, he was a man of few words anyway, but without telling me anything, it got me to understand this whole thing about satisfaction, which related to values, because it opened a can of worms when it came to my values. Now, has any of you heard of the guy called Alan Watts? Some of you have? British philosopher, right? He passed away, and he was someone that championed bringing Eastern philosophies into the Western world, yeah? And he talked about the linguistics of making it there, right? He goes, we only have the now. Because when you think about it, how many times have you had people say to you, oh, geez, you're doing really well. And you'll say, your natural retort is, oh, we'll get there. Right? But the problem is, by the time you get there, it becomes here. So, by definition, does there even exist? Because every time you get there, it doesn't become there, and there's over there somewhere. Right? And so, when my old man was breathing away, bless his little cotton socks, it made me understand that as long as we've got time in the game of life, as long as we're still breathing, there's always time in the game of life to score or concede. You can always get more satisfied or less satisfied, right? As long as you're still kicking around in the game of life. So you might as well just play the game in the moment, you know? Now, on the value side of things, after he passed away, I was sat at home, and my mum was in radiotherapy in a different hospital, and I was sat in my folks' place, and it was very, very quiet. All I could hear was the ticking of an old grandfather clock, proper old school stuff. And I broke down, because I was like, I don't even know who I am. My values did not represent who I was. And I went on like a hard, it was literally, I think it was about 6 hours that I then went down this deep Alice in Wonderland hole of what my values are, what represents my DNA in words. I came up with 3 at the time, and it wasn't the ones that you would think. Connection, fun, simplicity. As soon as I worked that out, and FYI, I've got a little QR code at the end of this that can take you to a values exercise that I talk about in a book, but I've put it in a workbook type form, so you're more than welcome to scan it, take it, it's free. Because I would argue that whatever you think your values are, chances are they might not be. And that's where we come to the problem when it comes to the word identity. Because, is it safe to say, any of you been in sales or are in sales? Have done any sales? I think it's fair to say, you can't sell what you don't know. You kind of need to know your product in order to be able to sell it. It frustrates me to tears, and it might freak you guys out a little bit, being consumers of my industry, and the amount of real estate agents that don't actually understand their product that they're trying to sell. Like I am knee deep in contracts on a Friday night because I call between 8 to 12 auctions a week, and it's crazy to think how many times that I know more about the product than they do. They've been working on it for months. I've been working on it for less than 24 hours. It's a bit scary, isn't it? You can't sell what you don't know. And the point I'm making is, if you don't know who you are, how can you sell yourself to the world? How? I would argue that you're selling yourself down the garden path if you don't know who you are. One of the things that really drove me towards real desperation and loneliness from a personal point of view was the fact that I just did not know who I was. I was living a life based on what my family thought was best, my conditioning. Right? My parents both being police officers, they were born to conform, raised to conform. They were part of a machine. Now, did they do a bad job? I mean, geez, they raised me the best way that they could, that they knew how. So I think they're fab, right? Not knocking them. However, you know how they always say that you, as a kid, when you become a parent yourself, you want to break the cycle. Whenever anybody asks me what I want for my kids, I just tell everybody freedom to choose. Freedom of choice. I've said to my son, probably not the best parenting in the world, I said to my son, I don't care if you rob a bank as long as you say please and thank you on the way out. As long as they know that their old man's going to be rocking and rolling behind them, swinging like a windmill, right? I don't care what they do, right? As long as they do it with good intentions and manners. So here's a few numbers for you, and I'm going to bring this into a bit of a businessy type sense, if I may. I like being all altruistic and stuff, but I figured because you lot are dead clever at things, you might like a few numbers, all right? I don't know, I might be wrong. Okay. Did a little bit of research. 62% of workers say their job is central to their identity, right? in day one, lockdown one, I think it was the 28th of March. Is that the date? Is that the date? Wicked. 28th of March, 2020. And bearing in mind, right, I'm like an auctioneer and I'm connected to a whole bunch of salespeople where they are made of Teflon, i.e. nothing sticks, right? That lockdown happened. I would argue that this is light on because I was up till 3 a.m. with my phone melting with all of these Teflon agents, some of whom actually crying down the phone because all of a sudden they had their identity taken away from them. They didn't know what to do about anything. And yet if you spoke to them the day before, smooth as silk, right? I would argue that that's light on. 1 in 3 Australians feel a mismatch between their career and their true self, contributing towards disengagement and turnover. That's the whole trying to fit in kind of malarkey, right? I was actually having a chat to Nadine before, and I don't want to get all genderific or anything like that, right? But one observation that I did happen to make is that there isn't a hell of a lot of women in this space right now, right? And same with real estate. You know, we were talking about auctioneering. You know, the majority of auctioneers, how many have you seen a female auctioneer? Yeah, well, they do exist, and they are absolutely brilliant, if I'm being honest, right? I was saying, it doesn't matter how big and bad and ugly you are, how much of a gangster you are. I'm sure even Hitler was afraid of one person, his mum, right? There's always one authority higher than the highest authority, and that's their mother, right? And I would argue that when it comes to this whole feeling of true self, my mum, and again, I love her to bits, and she made it to the top of a man's world. She made it to anti-terrorism intelligence in the UK, working with MI5. One of 4 people to be in her role in the UK police force. Started at 16 in college during the Thatcher years. It was shit being in the public services in the Thatcher years, and it was shit being a woman. Because she made everybody hate women, right? She really did, right? Now, but the thing is, when it came to myself, when it comes to, I just did what I thought I needed to do in order to conform, you know, fit that conveyor belt of life. And I was lucky that I was thrown into an auction by my former father-in-law, who's no longer with us, bless him. And he threw me at an auction saying, Andy, I think you'd be quite good at it. Gave me 2 weeks, no training, and I shit myself. But what I found was where I was supposed to be in life. And I found myself to be tremendously lucky to be able to say that, right? Talk about flow. You lot are in chaos, and I've got sandy beaches and sunsets and stuff going on in my head during an auction, right? Couldn't be happier.
Andy, sorry, can I just ask a question on that? Because I know we're going to go on to the next slide. So alongside that, how much do you think it's the challenges with businesses? So most businesses like to say we've got values, but then actually creating an environment where people can actually be true to themselves. So what's your view around, yes, that's a fact, but actually balancing that with the environments and corporate landscape in Australia that you can actually go and be yourself at work? It's
a really interesting question, right? And that's why I think that we've got a real identity crisis, because the individualization, the word self, the suffix self, has become so much more used over the last however many years. There's actually a graph, it's getting exponential how much the suffix self is being used. And yet, workforces are supposed to work together, right?
Yep.
Doesn't really compute when you think about it. You know, it doesn't really compute. And when it comes to employees who experience an identity role conflict, and the fact that they're 2.5 times more likely to quit, sort of talks into this quite significantly. Now, you then overlay this when it comes to individualization with the intergenerational plays, right? The whole Gen Zs are all, you know, they're all useless. Well, baby boomers, you guys are all stuck up yourselves and all this sort of carry on. And we all try, and when it comes to workforce, one of the biggest problems that we have is retention of talent. Big problem around retention of talent. And when you overlay identity concerns with generational concerns, it becomes a real myriad of issues, right? When it comes to how to keep a team together. 74% of Gen Zs, though, Gen Zs, yes, I am British, so I'm going to say the word Z, identify as success being about personal fulfillment, not just money. We keep throwing money at people, thinking that it's going to keep them. We try and use the golden handcuffs that I was a victim of at one point, right? Those golden handcuffs aren't half as strong anymore. Why? Because at the end of the day, as long as you've got one of these, you can make money. Really interesting conversation I had with a guy that's just started who's just had a tech startup, right? Incredibly intelligent bit of kit around buyer advocacy, because that is the biggest section of the real estate space that's growing. 400 new buyer advocates a month at the minute, going very American, where you're going to have an agent on one side versus an agent on the other side, right? And he said he went to do a cap raise, and he goes, Andy, it was really weird. It felt like I was back in the 1980s. I went, why is that? He goes, I went to 3 big VCs. Each of them looked at me, and I thought I was selling a tech platform. And they all said, tech's wonderful, what else you got? And they were like, what? And these VCs said, look, no offense, but a kid can build an app on ChatGPT now. What else have you got? 3 separate VC firms said to him unequivocally, we ain't investing in tech no more. We're investing in culture. Wow. And he goes, I thought I was selling a tech platform. I'm actually selling a community. He goes, I didn't get it. He goes, now I do, which is why he's asked me to come go play with him, right? So all of a sudden he's gone, oh shit, what's the community about, right? So the point that we're trying to get to here is the fact that we've got this real, is it an impossible task to truly honor people's identity whilst at the same time keeping a team together? Can we do it? Now, I've got this analogy, right? I like to think of humans, I like to think of people as a jigsaw. As a community, society, we're all jigsaws, right? And my point when it comes to your own values is, when it comes to that analogy, is if you don't understand the shape of the jigsaw piece that represents who you are, how do you know where you fit in to the picture? How do you know where you fit in? And likewise, if you are a leader of a team, how good are you at jigsaw puzzles? Because that's essentially what you need to be these days. It's not a case of getting people to fit to a certain space. It's how can I make sure that I understand the shape of each individual piece that I've got to work with, so I can put a picture together that makes sense. Interesting, right? People talk about the word, I'm so glad I'll pay you later, right? I'm so glad, right? People talk about authenticity. How many of you have heard the word authenticity recently? Ad nauseum, right? How many of you are getting sick of the word authenticity? Yeah, a few wry smiles. I would argue that part of the identity crisis is the fact that we're banging on about authenticity. Because authenticity is only part of the equation. I'm going off piece now. I don't care. I don't like death by PowerPoint. All right? Authenticity. To be truly authentic, feel free if anyone wants to disagree here, but I'm marinating on this. To be truly authentic means to go to your gut instinct, right? Authenticity infers operating to one's gut instinct, because that's your first reaction to everything, right? That's your gut instinct. Now, how many people's gut instincts should never see the light of day? So many, right? So many, right? Geez, how many gut instinct reactions have I had in the last 24 hours that I'm really glad I've got a filter for, right? However, the reason why everyone's banging on about authenticity is because we've all been getting led by our brains for way too long. I have this thing, right? And I've identified it through my own battle scars. Regret only comes through decisions made with the head. Have you heard that phrase, win or learn? Nelson Mandela, or the more popularist version of it is Conor McGregor. All right? But Nelson Mandela came up with it first. He goes, I don't win or lose, I win or learn. You're only going to win or learn if you make a gut call. Regret's formed with decisions through the head, where your gut's telling you something else. You know when you make a decision and you go, fuck, I knew I should have done that. Because it goes wrong. That's when you regret stuff. When you go through with your gut instinct and you get something wrong, it's way easier to process that as a lesson. Now, authenticity, though, is driving us too far down this way, which is why you're starting to see more extremism and things like that popping up. We're finding like we need to push the boundaries even further and further and further and further. But the problem that we've got from a societal point of view with respect to identity is the fact that it's that noisy in the world these days, people don't actually understand who they are. Which is why you see more protests. Because bless them, all the we're not going to get all political or anything, but all these pro-Palestinian protests and all that sort of jazz, I'm sure they've got all the best intentions in the world. I like to think of things as cup half full. Take a map of the world into one of them crowds and ask them to point out where Gaza is. The vast majority couldn't tell you. But they're there for a cause. They're there because they think they're part of a higher thing, right? They're identifying themselves according to the cause. Right? And that's the thing with Gen Zs. They need to feel personal fulfillment. They say they're identified by value and causes because they don't understand who they are and what their shape of their jigsaw piece is. Now, I would argue, realistically, the conversation that we should be having is not about authenticity, it's about alignment. Where gut, head, and one other thing are all in alignment. What we want to do, what we need, what we feel we should do, and what the right thing to do is. That's where I think the game needs to be played. That's where I feel people can really own their identity, is when those three things are in alignment. Do we reckon we need to work on our identities a little bit more? Because I would argue, and this is what really the only aim I have for today is to try and crack open your minds to maybe look at things a little bit differently. Whether it's yourself, your business, your life, whatever. That's my only purpose today, right? So this is the challenges around identity, and this is where rubber hits the road a little bit. Greater sensitivity towards personal identity, you know, that whole, like I said, the letters of the alphabet type stuff. And this is what these are all the things that leaders have to challenge, that have to try and contend with. Gen AI, what's real and what's not? And I've got 4 statements at the end of this that I hope you to write down that you can marinate on. Yeah? Intergenerational conflict. Now the thing is, I'm trying to keep pretty quiet about this at the minute, right? Because I'm stuck. I'm the meat in the intergenerational conflict sandwich, right? Where we've got boomers above me going, kids these days, right? And I've got kids these days going, you old cantankerous prick, like that. You know what I mean? And according to them, it's irrefutable that they are cantankerous, right? But me, being the meat in the sandwich, is loving it at the minute because I understand both languages. and the thing is, if those 2 generations were to cotton on, that they are perfect jigsaw pieces to fit with each other. Knowledge and experience, scale and speed. Stick them 2 together, you've got the perfect picture. And I'm out of a job, right? Different drivers, what makes people happy? No, different maps, moral compasses, different maps of the world, all that sort of stuff. Mental health and neurodivergent concerns. The mental health challenge cost the Australian economy $4 billion last year. I've got a little bit of a bugbear with it. And this is someone that's got all the battle scars. Been on the verge twice. If I jumped, I'd rattle like a pillbox, right? I feel that unfortunately, the way that humans are, we like to exploit things, weaknesses. That's kind of how a lot of society rolls. And the amount of mental health days that are getting taken is taking the mickey, if you ask me. The world's going to keep turning whether we like it or not. We've got to stop talking. We've got to start doing stuff to fix things. Right? Now, when we try and solve all those components of a very complex equation when it comes to leadership, good luck. Because not only are you supposed to be business owners, you're supposed to be counsellors, you're supposed to be, people that reason, you're supposed to be diplomats, you're supposed to be this, you're supposed to be that. You're supposed to be all the things that humans have become very insufficient. There's been a lack of self-sufficiency, which is ironic when you think that everybody's thinking about self-development, right? So I've got 4 statements, that I'd like you to consider. The first one is that perception has become under greater scrutiny by reality. What I mean by that is, next year, they projected that 48% of all content on social media is going to be created by Gen AI. 48%. The awareness piece around pictures of AI, right? I've got a friend who, he's like Willy Wonka, and he's created the world's first AI DJ, right? And they've started doing vlogs. This chick called DJ Nova. If you watch the vlog, you wouldn't know that it's AI. He's actually in the process of creating one of the world's first AI feature films as well, full length. Weird unit, really cool guy. Right? My point though is the fact that society, all of us, like very quickly, has become very, very attuned to scrutinize what's real and what's not. And this is where an opportunity lies. Because the opportunity here is, up until recently, perception has been the reality on social media. Everyone's been looking at the human highlight reel and then panicking themselves because they are not that. Right? Which is why everyone blames social media for the downfall of society from a mental health perspective. Right? I would argue that herein lies an opportunity, because all of a sudden the world is being educated into being a lot more, scrutinous around everything. Not a bad thing. I used to hate the word skepticism, but at the minute, I'm kind of glad it exists. Right? Again, police officer, the product of police officers, where they are designed to be skeptical about everything. Right?
Andy, just on that, do you think that really comes back to communication? I'll give you an example. How many people have sent an email and you've fired off your email and then you've spoken to the person and you've said, well, that wasn't how I meant it to be taken. The danger of email. Do you think really what you're talking about there is getting into the way society communicates?
No, I would argue it's more around the way that society interprets information.
Okay.
Rather than communication. Yeah. I mean, from a communication point of view, let me take you into real estate land for a second. And when I'm doing real estate, when I'm doing sales coach, I always reverse engineer from human behaviors when it comes to real estate. Odd, I know that I actually pay attention to the human first. It might be a bit different to some. But the way in which we deliver communication determines the way it's interpreted. So when I'm talking to my agents about vendor collaboration, they call it vendor management, but to be honest, I don't think we should be managing our clients, right? That's like having someone come in and dictate to you how you should run your house, right? Not a good idea. Collaboration's where it's at. But the way in which we deliver communication is the way it will determine how it's interpreted, whether it's in person, over the phone, via text message, or via email. Yeah? Email, very passive. Good luck anybody paying attention to any of it. It's more the SMS. Because how many times you got in trouble with your better half because you've sent something thinking it's purely innocent, and all of a sudden you're in the doghouse for the next week. Right? Right? We've all been there. We've all been there. The misinterpretation, and that's more dependent on the way that human is feeling in that moment, right? Because a joke could be taken as a joke one day, but if someone's had a really bad day, been in a car accident or something like that, right, and they're just really shitty with life, then you send them a joke. Good luck.
I think people like SMS. I'll give you another example. I picked up my eldest daughter, Amy, with a friend, 15-year-old Amy is, from the train station last night. I phoned her up. Why are you phoning me? Just send me a text. I was like, well, you've got a mobile phone. I'm phoning you to find out where I should meet you.
Yeah.
But it's sort of, oh, can you just text me? So.
And it's interesting, right?
And it's how people communicate.
No, it's how we're interpreting it all. And I'd argue through social, because the way that we're becoming a lot more scrutinizing around what is real and what's not, it might be giving us an opportunity to actually ascertain a bit of patience and a bit of half a second to maybe go, right, what is actually being said here? As opposed to taking things at face value. Interesting. I like that. That could be a good thing. That might stop me from getting into so much trouble. Vulnerability is the key to true professionalism. That's one of my favorite ones. That I talk about in that book, right? And the reason why I say vulnerability is the key to true professionalism is based off a story when I was an agent, right? And I didn't realize that I was going through some serious mental health issues. But my daughter was getting towards 6 months old, first kid, and the mother of my kids said to me, Andy, I'm going back to work, because I was avoiding. I kept finding reasons to get out of the house, and we didn't realize it at first. And she goes, Andy, I'm going back to work, right? Every other Wednesday, if you're not home with Eliza, the dog's looking after her, right? Because I was avoiding being with her for whatever reason, right? And interestingly, right, the very, very next appraisal that I went to was at 18 Josephine Avenue in Cranbourne North. It was a very sliding doors moment for me in life. And I was appraising a property for an Aussie couple, getting towards the end of it. I hadn't listed it, right? Did all right, but I hadn't listed it. I hadn't got their business at that point. And as I'm leaving, I'm getting my stuff together. I said, right, you can reach it, you can get hold of me any time of day, 24/7. Like, you can just text me, you know, chances are I'll be awake and I'll be around doing stuff. And then I corrected myself. I went, oh, shit, sorry, except for every other Wednesday. And she piped up, she goes, why is that? And I said, because look, it's like my daddy-daughter day, and like that's the one day I've got to dedicate to my daughter, as I'm sure you can appreciate. She's probably more important than anybody else. They sat me back down and listed with me on the spot. Now, the point is not the fact that I was like the best thing since sliced bread when it came to real estate. No. All right? What the point I'm making is that from a real estate salesy point of view, but this is applicable to all of the white-collar professional landscape, we feel that we can't own the things that make us weak, right? In that moment, what I thought was potentially a weakness was the fact that every other Wednesday you might not be able to reach me that quickly. I thought that was a weakness. By owning that vulnerability in that moment, I learned a very valuable lesson. Vulnerability leads to all of those things that we're trying to be coached into, like authenticity, like integrity, like transparency. How on earth, by definition, can you be authentic if you don't own what you're not good at? That's a rose-tinted authenticity, if you ask me. I would argue, to be truly professional, it's owning what you don't know.
Do you think that's why humans are tribal? Because as individuals we're vulnerable, but if you're part of a group, then you can help each other with vulnerabilities.
Can you tell that I teed him up for that? Can you tell?
By the way.
Can you tell?
I wouldn't break the system.
Yeah. Now, the next one, if you focus on what you do, you are no longer required. And the story I have behind that is the book. So I was partway through the first chunk of the book, and I had a massive attack of imposter syndrome. I got tremendously insecure. I'm like, this thing's shit. Who the heck's going to want to listen to this? Who's going to want to read this? This is ridiculous. This is so bad. Loads of people have said this sort of stuff. Can't come up with anything new. I'm panicking. It's game over. So I emailed the first chunk of the book to my publisher, who sent me a one-line sentence back saying, Andy, ... where's all the swearing? ? I was a bit confused by that response. And I'm like, that is not the pat on the bum that I was hoping for. So I called her and I said, what's that mean? She goes, Andy, what is this? And then I panicked even more at that point. I'm like, well, gee, I'm trying to sound intelligent, man. Like I know like 5 big words. I'm trying to stick them all in there as many times as I possibly can, right? Shit, trying to sound clever. And she goes, Andy, being clever doesn't suit you. And I went, you bitch. I was not impressed. I'm like, you're not helping here, Leslie. And she goes, Andy, just calm down for a second and listen to me. She goes, believe you me, there are millions of people that know what you know. And I went, my God, just shoot me now, right? I did tell you that I've had mental health issues, right? She goes, millions of people know what you know, but it's not what you know that got you the deal. It's who you are. Now, this whole vernacular around AI stealing our jobs and all this sort of stuff, right? It's true. It's going to happen. You guys know this better than me. But the beautiful thing is, and the opportunity with all of this, is the fact that it's making us, it's forcing us to become more human. We're going back to the 80s. How cool is that? Right? It's wicked, isn't it? It's really, really cool. Now, the last one is the important one. Perspective gives you power. They say that knowledge is power. I disagree. Coming back to your point, my friend, about how we all have different maps of the world and what I think is right is not what you might think is right, right? Right. I would argue that the more perspectives that we take the time to understand, the more power we have to lead teams and change a world. I would argue that it's the lack of understanding of people's perspectives that is driving so many of the problems that we have in the world these days. You want to know how to lead people? Learn them. Learn their perspectives. Not what they know, right? And my gosh, you don't have to accept their perspective as writ. But please, if you're going to marinate on anything, marinate on that. Because we weren't designed to agree, right? We were designed to complement. And some pieces of the jigsaw ain't going to fit with some others, because that's how we were cut. And that's okay. From a leadership point of view, understanding that personality A and personality B, they're not designed to be together. Their skill sets might suggest as much, but it's their perspective that needs to come together. There are millions of people that know what we know. There are very few people that are who we are. I would argue there's one of each of us. Quit trying to bring skill sets together. Bring perspectives together. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is by first understanding your own perspective, which is by understanding who you are, your own identity. You do that, start learning everybody else's. You won't need to know that much if you understand people's perspectives. And a really last final example is when I was working in a bar. I used to run a bar in London. Nadine knows it very well. It used to be a vodka bar in London. Now, was I the best I was the GM. Was I the best cocktail maker? Nah. There was this camp Spanish guy called Carlos, who was one of the best ever humans I've ever met, from Tenerife, I think he was. He made he made the best espresso martini before they became popular, right? Legend of a cocktail maker. Was I the best at pouring drinks? Nah. My former wife, who I met at the bar, right? She used to look like she wasn't doing that many, but then when the final takings came through, she was always number one. She had an efficiency about the way that she served people that was insane. Was I the best at anything there? No. Why was I GM? Well, I didn't know at the time. But now I'm looking back and thinking, maybe it's because I understood all of those things and fit them together like a really cool jigsaw.
It reminds me of a bit of advice I got given by Andrew Banks, who I worked for before we set Granite up. He used to say, be interested, not interesting, which is exactly what you're saying around the jigsaw.
Just think of everybody as a bit of a jigsaw and then work out where they fit in the picture. And from a business perspective, any of you business owners? Anyone business owners here? Yeah? The challenge for you is understanding if you can really see the picture that is your business. Do you know the detail of it? Do you know the colour of it? What it's supposed to look like?
I think that's relevant to, most of you run teams within organisations as well, within your team, understanding the picture of your team.
Where you fit. The individualisation of the world, it's a bit overrated. I have this, and I'll leave you on this last one. I have this opinion that there's no point having abundance if you've got no one to share it with. It's not abundance if you don't share it. Have a think about that one. Anyway, I don't know if today's been useful, right? I don't know. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. Maybe a few of us are going to go, that dickhead got me up at 5 a.m. to this. And if that's the case, I can but apologise, right? But hopefully, one thing that I have perhaps got you to do is maybe just think about maybe one or two things in your life a little bit differently, one or two relationships in your life a little bit differently. A person that you've been really disagreeing and arguing with and thinking that they're an absolute arsehole, when realistically, it might be a case of you just haven't taken the time to understand their perspective and their identity.
Actually, I do agree with this sentence because I believe perspective represents everybody's value, and people usually share the same value will be somehow just mutually attract each other.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Perspective is formed by the values that we have because the values give value to things, right? Nothing has a value until it runs through our value filters, and then we assign a value to it, which then forms that. Make sense? Has today been helpful?
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you enjoyed it?
Yes.
Awesome.
Very good. So Andy's QR code's there. We'll also send it out. Quick announcement. You might have seen on LinkedIn, but Mark Carter, the legend he is now the CEO of Granite People. Well done, Mark. And we've also launched another business within the group called Granite Labs, which is around product and innovation, which is led by Steve Forbes, who's actually down with a client today, so he's not here. But if you want to connect with me and learn more about it with Steve, happy to have that conversation. So that will give us Granite People, Granite Consulting, Granite Labs, and then most importantly, the community of which we're so proud and grateful that you're all part of. Events such as today, and that really underpins everything we do at Granite Group. And so give Andy and yourselves a big round of applause and have a great day.